The truth behind mind control experimentation,
and how it might still be taking place to this day.
MK-Ultra, one of the most infamous cases of mind control experimentation, began and ended in the 1950s, or so they say. Recent evidence suggests that the CIA's influence on the minds of the American population might actually be ongoing and getting stronger by the minute. For those of you who don't know, MK-Ultra was an illegal human experimentation designed to identify whether or not illicit substances could be used as mind control devices. Those involved in the experiment underwent rigorous cycles of being pumped full of substances and then tormented until their minds began to blur the lines between fiction and reality. And the majority of individuals involved in the process lived out the rest of their days institutionalized and in need of around-the-clock care. Essentially, their lives ended the day the experiment began. Today, the widespread increase of prescriptions of psychotropic medications has people wondering if the experiment is still possibly taking place on a much larger, bolder scale, and if those suffering from mental illnesses in North America have become the new unwitting test subjects to this modern-day version of MK-Ultra. Theories that prescription drugs combined with subliminal messaging in social media campaigns being used to brainwash the public has been a growing topic in the past few years, leading me to personally wonder, could there be some truth to this?
So before MK-Ultra and Project Artichoke, there was Project Bluebird. This was a secret CIA program that began in 1952. Main goal here was to explore ways to control human behavior through hypnosis, illicit substances, and psychological techniques. The CIA wanted to see if they could use these methods to gather intelligence, make people do things against their will, and protect their own agents from enemy mind control. This one's also famous for using a specific psychedelic substance during the experiments. They'd also use sensory deprivation and hypnosis, where they do stuff like plant fake memories and false information in the test subjects. They also experimented with sleep deprivation to put them into a more vulnerable state, and they'd use harsh psychological techniques to break down individuals' resistance in an attempt to strip them of their sense of self. It was all very extreme, and this was just the project that paved the way for the larger scaled MK-Ultra. It doesn't sound like something that would happen in real life. It sounds like the plot of an over-the-top spy thriller, but unfortunately, these dark chapters in US history really did happen.
Before I hop off the MK-Ultra train, I have to mention one more reason people believe the experiments to be ongoing today, and that is microchips. Of course, there is the more recent argument that these microchips are being implanted into our bloodstream through mandated injectable medicine, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. What I actually want to talk about is ear candling, and the possible link between that and the continuation of CIA-sanctioned mind control experimentation. Now, I think we can all agree that ear candling is a fairly alternative medicinal practice, making those who participate in it the perfect candidates for government-sanctioned microchip mind control. In recent years, there have been several incidents of people claiming to have been implanted during their candling sessions. Bear with me. Reports of strange buzzing noises no one else can hear, headaches, and physical discomfort when interacting with something the CIA might consider anti-government propaganda after receiving an ear candling treatment have been making headlines in conspiracy communities as of late. But apparently it's not just urban legend and fear-mongering. In fact, one person claimed to have isolated one of these implants and observed it firsthand. Apparently, a practitioner cut the implant out of one of their ear candles after noticing something off about it prior to use. The implant appeared plastic, but moved like mercury when placed into a glass jar, and then overnight it disappeared as though it had somehow dissolved in its container. I guess these implants are only designed to last in organic environments such as beeswax and the human body. If you have undergone candling recently and you're currently experiencing any of the symptoms I previously described while listening to this video, you might want to get that checked out.
The Stargate Project. This was one of America's nuttiest army units, but they were around for a long time. The unit was established in 1977. Their job was to investigate whether psychic abilities like remote viewing could be an asset to the military. And what exactly is remote viewing? Well, it's the ability to see stuff that's happening but from far away, using your mind. So for a long time there were whispers about a group like this actually existing. Most people scoffed at the idea and called it ridiculous until the Stargate Project became declassified in 1995. Yeah, they operated for that long. There were only about 15 to 20 individuals in the unit at any given time, and they operated out of a dingy wooden barracks. Remote viewers were asked to describe hidden military bases, find missing people, or even attempt to predict future events. Most of the time though, the results were completely off the mark. In 1995, the government decided to shut down the Stargate Project, concluding that it hadn't produced enough useful information to justify the cost.
Sex workers are government spies hell-bent on taking down those who oppose the ruling class. While that might sound like a pretty heinous statement, at one point in time during the 1950s, it was right on the money. A sub-project of MKUltra, appropriately named Operation Midnight Climax, began in 1954, and while it was technically part of MKUltra, there were a few key differences in the way the two projects operated, namely consent. Operation Midnight Climax was designed to test the effects of illicit substances on non-willing and uninformed participants. Sex workers would select Johns, take them back to a room in a safe house, pump them full of a variety of substances, pleasure them, and then interrogate them, all while a CIA agent watched from behind one-way glass. The goal of the experiment was to study the correlation between mind control and sexual behavior, to see if a seduction mixed with a prescription cocktail might be a viable tactic that would allow American agents to gain control over enemy spies.
Project Chatter was another very controversial precursor to MKUltra. Project Chatter was a secret US Navy program that began in the fall of 1947 and continued into 1953. The main goal of this project was to research and test different illicit substances and methods for interrogating prisoners and extracting information. The Navy was particularly interested in using substances to see if they could make people reveal secrets. They experimented with various ones, mainly mescaline and scopolamine, to see if they could break down a person's resistance and make them talk more freely. At the head of this program was Charles Savage at the Naval Medical Research Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. These experiments were conducted on both animals and humans, a lot of time without the subjects fully knowing what was happening, certainly in the case of the animals, and the results were not very promising. The substances often just confused rather than gave any clear and reliable information. The substances often just confused the subjects and really made it hard for them to provide clear and reliable information. After the Korean War ended in 1953, Project Chatter merged into MKUltra.
Spending too much time on your phone or watching TV can have dire side effects, including falling under the spell of the Soviet Union and Igor Viktorovich Smirnov. In the late 1980s, as the Cold War neared its end, the Soviet military decided they needed to do something to keep the people of Russia from attempting to leave the Soviet Union, and so they enlisted the help of Igor Smirnov, who was known at the time for his almost mystical powers of persuasion. The plan was for Igor to use psychotechnology, subliminal messaging, to correct unwanted behaviors in Russian soldiers suffering from PTSD, and to see if the same methods could be applied to the Russian public. Igor called the process psycho-correction, a term that encompassed the use of subliminal messages to alter a subject's will and even make permanent changes to a subject's personality without their knowledge. As it is Russia, there is not much other information of the experiment, but in 1993, Smirnov was actually consulted by the FBI in regards to a terror cult holding down fort at Mount Carmel Center in Texas. He suggested piping subliminal messages into the phone lines of family members of the cult's leader, but the FBI declined. In 2004, Smirnov died, but it seems as though his legacy has continued, because in May of 2009, the Department of Homeland Security announced plans to incorporate some of Smirnov's methods into airport security screening systems.
The Montauk Project has always been slagged off as a conspiracy, but when I describe it, you tell me if it really sounds all that far-fetched compared to everything else on this list, most of which has been declassified and 100% verified. The theory claims secret government experiments took place at Camp Hero, a decommissioned military base in Montauk, New York. According to the theory, these experiments focused on time travel, mind control, and contact with extraterrestrial life. I mean, maybe the time travel part is a little far-fetched, but At the same time, if the government's willing to take mind control seriously, why wouldn't they dip into the time travel game as well? Might as well. The project is said to have started sometime in the 70s. It's said that scientists were trying to unlock psychic abilities like telepathy and remote viewing, and some will even claim they succeeded in creating time portals. That part I'm more skeptical of. Attempted, maybe. Succeeded, highly unlikely. But Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon made the whole conspiracy even more well-known when they published the book The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, in 1992. Nichols described his own apparent experiences in the project, claiming to have recovered repressed memories of being kidnapped on several occasions to continue his involvement in the experiments.
Could you be convinced to kill? That was the question on the minds of high-clearance CIA agents back in 1951 when operations for Project Artichoke began at the order of the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. The goal was to see if, through the use of various methods, including hypnosis, forced addiction and withdrawals to injectable substances, and oral substance use, a subject could be persuaded to involuntarily perform an act of attempted assassination, even if it were to cost the subject their own life. Basically, the government was curious to see exactly what it would take to strip a person of their inhibitions, morals, and willpower, while at the same time keeping them lucid enough to successfully perform the act. During the lifespan of the experiment, one subject was kept on psychotropics for 77 days straight. Whether or not the project was successful remains unknown. It's the CIA after all, but in a declassified report, a CIA agent stated that if the hypnosis succeeded, assassins could be created to assassinate a prominent, redacted, politician, or if necessary, an American official. As far as we know, the project ended in 1953. As far as the CIA knows, it's probably still ongoing.
The Montreal Experiments were a series of highly unethical clinical trials with the goal of treating schizophrenia, at least at first, but things got out of hand. Beginning in 1957, at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, the experiments were led by Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron and were partly funded by the CIA as part of their MKUltra program. Dr. Cameron's experiments involved a method he called psychic driving, which included all these intensive treatments like repeated electroshock therapy and playing recorded messages on a loop for patients. He was trying to literally erase patients' memories and reprogram their minds. Sensory deprivation was also used, which was far worse in this case than it sounds. Of course, the eyes and ears were covered, but then patients would be almost starved, also given very little water, and then injected with substances to put them into this vegetative state. Absolutely nightmarish. And obviously, there were severe side effects here, including memory loss and personality changes. Many of these test subjects were just never the same again.
Stay safe out there.